Hi, my name is Jenalynn Weed. There's a lot of scenes that I love in the series, but if I had to pick one, it's the scene that first rattled me the very first time I watched The Chosen. It was the first episode when Mary met Jesus. I wasn't actually quite sure how the scene was going to play out, but when he laid his hand on hers, I audibly gasped and my heart dropped, but in a good way. It was so sudden, but I felt as if I could feel Jesus' hand on mine. And with his hand on hers saying, "That's not for you," I started tearing up and I started crying because I've been struggling with eating disorders and they're kind of like having an addiction. And so I just actually felt like I was in Mary's place in that scene and I could see Jesus right in front of me. And so that's when I knew that this series was different. That's how I knew it was real, because it was raw and it was authentic. It's the most raw and authentic show that I've seen, and especially for a Christian show, because it's so easy. I've grown up in a Christian household and, all of the films can get a little cheesy. And so I was really unsure about this TV show until that episode, and more precisely until that very moment. And I wanted to watch the whole entire series that night. And so that is my favorite scene out of the whole entire show. And every single time I watch it, time and time after I rewatch the series, that moment just gets me every time. And when he calls her by her name, that is what gets me.
Mary of Magdala.
Absolutely, 100% yes. Against the Tide has given me insight on the actors and behind the scene happenings. Since there's only 8 episodes so far, that was not enough to satisfy me. So I've been watching every video and every clip from The Chosen and from Against the Tide Media and everything that they put out so I can learn more. And through learning more, I've been able to tell more people about the show in a more persuasive way. Instead of just saying, "Oh my gosh, yeah, it's so good," I can say, "You should watch the show for X, Y, and Z reasons." And this show's different from other shows because of the authentic relationships between castmates and through their stories. And so I'm able to more persuasively share about The Chosen to family, friends, people I don't know. And so it's been able to give me more to tell other people about the show. A lot of them are really good, but I would say my favorite one was Nick's interview. I loved his perspective, especially at the end when he spoke about how, the right things fall into place with no effort on his part when God wants it to happen. And then the things that he tries so hard to achieve doesn't get him anywhere, and he doesn't get them.
And I just said, I had a very passionate talk with God, as I usually do. And I basically said, I was like, okay, fine. We're going to do this your way. I'm not going to lift a finger. I'm not going to try anymore. I want you to basically use me, my body, as a vessel to basically do what you put me on earth to do. And then ever since then, I kind of woke up and I just feel like a 10-year-old kid again.
I really resonate with that. That's happened multiple times in my life. I was trying to run through a certain door in my life and God closed it. And no matter how hard I tried to push it open, he said, "That's not for me." And then he opened a door that I had I didn't even know that door had even existed. And it was better than anything that I could have imagined. And so it's just incredible seeing God work like that. And Nick's interview was also encouraging because it reaffirmed how different The Chosen is. The set, the cast and crew, the relationships they had together, it's totally different than other projects. It encourages and reaffirms that The Chosen is doing God's work. Nick is also a funny guy, and so I appreciate the clips that he puts out, and I follow him on Instagram, and so he's just really lighthearted. So when he shared that story about Rick Astley and doing the dance and doing that on set, I just couldn't stop laughing. It reminded me of some shenanigans that my youth group and I did whenever we would go to conferences. We did some silly things like that. But one thing that I've seen with the different interviews, besides Nick's, is that a lot of people from The Chosen were having a rough time right before they got this project. Either their faith was wavering, or they were going through a rough patch in their faith, or they were just having a hard time in life and were discouraged. They got this project, and then their perspectives have changed. And so I've really appreciated that through the interviews.
It was like a couple of one too many rejections that I had for commercial stuff, and I was booking mostly commercial that year, and it wasn't really like, my heart wasn't really in it. I missed doing character-driven theatrical or TV dramas. It had been so long since I had done that I just was a little heartbroken over it, and I was like, okay, time to maybe grow up. Maybe it's time to do something practical. I was sort of just down on the whole thing. So I emailed my agent and I said, I just stop submitting me for a little bit. I need a break. I need to figure out what I need to do next. And I was just planning on finding something practical, an editing job or in production or something like that. And he ignored that request, thank God, and submitted me for Lilith and Mary Magdalene, and sent me the audition, sent me the sides. I read it. I thought, this is the role that I've dreamt of playing since I was a child. Like, this is such a dream role.
So before I started my current job at a Christian nonprofit where I'm at, I wanted to be a performer. And that was one of the doors that God closed for me for the time being. I've been singing and dancing since I was 3 years old, so I do have a performer background. I get some of the jokes, and I understand some of their struggles. And in addition to that, one of the roles in my current job at the nonprofit is to interview people. So I've had a 1.5 year experience interviewing people on Zoom. So I've become familiar with establishing a rhythm with people, encouraging morale, trying to get them to laugh and lighten the mood, because interviews can sometimes be nerve-wracking depending on what the interview is for. So I try to just be as relaxed as possible, and just always have a smile on my face, and just really try to get to know them and hear their story throughout the interview. My all-time favorite band is For King and Country. I've been a fan of theirs since the beginning in 2011. And I also love 10th Avenue North. Those are a couple of my absolutely favorite bands. And films are hard for me. I am a movie lover, so it's hard to pick favorites, especially if they belong to a franchise. But one of my absolute favorite franchises is Lord of the Rings. My mom has been a Lord of the Rings nerd her whole entire life, and so she brought that into our household. And the movies came out when I was 4, or the first movie came out when I was 4, and she let us kids watch them, and so I've been watching them since I was really young, and they get better as I grow older. I've been watching them pretty much once a year as I've been growing up, and they just keep getting better as I grow older and as I experience life. I pick out new things from that franchise, and I really resonate with the values in it and the storylines. And that one, it's been a favorite of mine since I was 4 years old. Now, for TV shows, I don't watch TV much, but when I do, it's to de-stress. So I usually watch a comedy show like The Office or Friends, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, you name it. I love to laugh, so I love funny shows. The scene at the wedding at Cana when Simon and Andrew meet Jesus in the corridor and they mention how Andrew can't dance. He has a problem with his feet.
When he tries to dance, he looks like a donkey walking on hot coals.
Oh, Andrew, do you deny it?
I've never seen a donkey walking on hot coals.
And it gets me every time because I am a dancer and my mom is not. And she basically dances like Andrew. And so that scene particularly gets me every time because it reminds me of my family, and just that camaraderie between the brothers was just really authentic. And so I really enjoyed that scene, and it makes me laugh. And again, it shows the humanity of Jesus. He's just laughing with them. And then in the succeeding scene, when he does start dancing, it just, it ties the ends together. And so I really enjoyed that scene. It always makes me laugh. God has impacted my life in several ways, starting from middle school up. So I grew up in the church, and so I knew all the answers. I had a lot of head knowledge. I was like Hermione Granger. I always had my hand raised in class trying to have the right answer because I thought the more answers you had, the better Christian you were. But then in middle school, friendships started crumbling, falling apart, were just superficial. And as friends kept leaving me, I was trying to look at the common denominator, and that common denominator in my mind was myself. And so I thought there was something wrong with me. And so that started a snowball effect of just thinking that I was worthless. And I grew into a depression. I actually became suicidal in early high school. And what really saved me was my youth group. I just didn't really have a lot of friends there. And so I just wanted to stop going. I just wanted to quit everything. And I texted the youth pastor to say I wasn't going to come. And he said, "You should come tonight." And so reluctantly I did. And that night the message that he gave was talking about how God sees us and he knows our pain and he feels our pain and how he loves us. And I was just struck by that night. I had no words, but I kept going to that youth group, and week after week, God was just speaking into my life. And it took a couple of years, but he really broke down those walls I had built up and those lies that the enemy had been telling me about how I was worthless, how I meant nothing. And it's taken a long time, but one thing that constantly comes up is how God loves me. And sometimes those lies do come back into my life, and I, think that other people are better than me. I'm worth less than other people. And at strategic places in my life, whether somebody posted something on Facebook or something that I watch, God speaks to me and he says, "I love you. I know you. You are mine." And so actually, going into watching The Chosen, I was going through a period of my life where I was having a really, really rough patch in my faith. My anxiety levels were through the roof, and I was really struggling with my eating disorders. And so this was the way that God was speaking to me and saying, "I see you, I know you, and I love you." And so The Chosen has impacted me in that way by God speaking through The Chosen. And, right now, my faith has been going so strongly. I've actually been following our prayers that Jonathan Rumi does on Instagram. And so I've been following those. And God has just really impacted my faith through things like The Chosen. And so just wanted to thank The Chosen again. And God has just been speaking through it in my life. I haven't actually seen a lot of portrayals of Jesus. I haven't seen The Passion of the Christ just because I am a little bit more sensitive. And so, when it did come out, my mom was like, "You probably shouldn't go see it." And it's very, it was very brutal. And so I haven't been able to see it yet. But One portrayal that I actually really liked was Jesus in the 2016 version of Ben-Hur, because he wasn't in the film much. He was more of like a side character, but I hate to say that. But, he wasn't in there for very long, but they chose to highlight his love for humanity in a very raw and progressive, way for the time that they were in 2,000 years ago. And, his love just seemed so remarkable for that time period. And so I really appreciated their portrayal of him, because even though it wasn't extensive, it showed his love and his selfless love for people. And ultimately, I would say The Chosen is definitely my favorite portrayal of Jesus. In many ways, it shows his humanity in a way that has lacked in other portrayals. The other portrayals show his divinity, but they don't show his humanity as much. The Chosen's Jesus feels real, like someone who can stand right in front of me, make a joke, because he was human. He had a sense of humor, and he also showed his compassion in the most gentle way. And so that has definitely been the portrayal of Jesus that has affected me the most. And I've had the most conversations with people about The Chosen's portrayal of Jesus, because, a lot of times Jesus is a little bit more stiff, regal, and, not as warm and human. And so me and my friends have had a lot of conversations about how different that portrayal is and why it just seems so inviting, because it does seem so human. Yes, I wholeheartedly believe that both believers and non-believers can create a beautiful masterpiece, because God gives talents to everyone, and beautiful things can come from anyone. And through that project of believers and non-believers working side by side, seeing the non-believers might look at Christianity differently. That's why I love when believers who are performers do go into secular spaces, because, if they're in a production like a Broadway show or a different type of production, they might be one of the only Christians in that production. And so they will be one of the only Christians who can speak up for Christianity and show Christ-like love to those non-believers. And so I 100% believe that non-believers and believers can work side by side to create a beautiful masterpiece, because God created all of us to create beautiful things. I would like to volunteer my time, because I just graduated from college last year and I have a lot of student debt. And so I don't have money to give, but I will wholeheartedly give my time, because I want to give something. And it hurts me when I can't give money to projects, especially a lot of money. I just want to give something, anything I have. And through stories that people share, others can learn more about themselves and about humanity as a whole. And so I love telling stories and sharing people's stories, because perhaps somebody's going through something similar to what I'm going through. So sharing stories can help encourage each other and to not feel so alone. And I feel like we really need that in this time. I've been encouraged by others sharing their stories, so I want to help in the process of that. Again, my name is Jenalynn Weed, and thank you so much for this opportunity.